and welcome to Pregnancy, Birth, and Beyond. And we're going to be doing a series of shows for the moms to help them to come to some information they might need about informed consent and birth choices, and just to review with all the moms what your options are. So some moms, when they get pregnant, they go out and they get a doctor and they just go to a hospital and they have a baby, and whatever the doctor says goes. But we're hoping that after a few episodes of this show, you'll realize that having a baby is a lot like getting married. You can choose your setting, you can choose who your provider is, you can choose where and when and how you want to have your baby.
Birth vision for this pregnancy has a lot to do with my last pregnancy and how it really didn't go as planned. I made a lot of preparations, took the Lamaze classes and things like that. But things really didn't go as I expected. I expected a natural birth. I had an epidural and a C-section, and it really did not go as I expected it to go. So this time, for me, it really made a difference with getting educated, talking to people, maybe who had had different experiences, and that's really where I got the vision from, to really want things to be different this time, and knowing what options I had, being educated on things that were available to me, and that made a difference for me.
So how do you envision your birth to play out this time? So when you think about your birth, what do you see this time?
Well, this time I think I definitely have an expectation to have a lot more support going into the actual even labor part of it. I have an expectation. I have a midwife this time, which I did not the first time. And so I definitely have a vision of a more serene environment, more support, being more relaxed, being more aware of what's going on. And I expect that the environment will just be more based on me and what my needs are, and kind of just not letting things go as they will. But because I think the midwife and having a doula, having somebody there that's going to be able to anticipate my needs and giving me the options that I can have or I can take to help my labor to be more successful, that's what I expect. To not just lay there and just see what's going to happen after an epidural has been given, but actually being able to really labor and work with the process.
How did you come to pick your last doctor with the first pregnancy?
Well, my last doctor was really based on the idea that I wanted to have my baby at a certain location, a certain hospital.
Okay.
The expectation was that this hospital was the best in the area and that this is where you should go. So just actually asking, a family member referred me to this particular provider where I knew that they delivered at that particular hospital. So my expectation was this was the best place. My provider, somebody else had used them, so I figured they were okay. They were satisfied with them. So that's how I chose my last provider. This provider, basically the same way, but with my expectation being a totally different experience, I wanted to definitely have a midwife. And I was referred to a place where, it's a midwifery practice, and I got to, experience what it's like there. I've had a few visits, and I really like the environment. I like the feel of the office. So that's kind of, it's definitely exceeding my expectation at this point based on what I've experienced so far.
And then you have the added stressor of it being important that the provider actually offer VBACs and be known for following through on that. And for those of you who don't know, VBAC is the medical term for a vaginal birth after a cesarean. And sometimes providers will tell you that they do VBAC, and then they do what we like to call a bait and switch, meaning you get most of your care with them, and then at 9 months, some of our moms out there may have heard, well, if you don't have your baby by 38 weeks or 39 weeks, then it's just a repeat C-section. You won't be given an opportunity to wait for your baby to come naturally. So that's important too when choosing another provider to come behind a C-section, that they really have a reputation of giving VBACs like they say they will. Now, when you chose your provider the first time, did you express to the provider what kind of birth you wanted? Did they seem interested? Did they ask you what you were looking for as far as the birth time went?
No. It was a fairly large practice. There was several doctors, and my thought process was, well, I want to see as many of the doctors as I can, so that if, when I go into labor, this is not a new face. So it kind of it was a different feel every time. You're dealing with a different person, somebody you haven't met before, but there was really not a lot of conversation about what to expect, how we're going to proceed, and what would you want for your labor. There was no kind of conversation like that. My main expectation for what I was going to expect came from my Lamaze class, and the different things that you were taught and different techniques. So I was expecting to use those things in my labor, which I used none of them except for the breathing, and there really was no expectation based on what the provider that care was in the prenatal part. There was no really expectation as far as what I was going to see and how it was going to go.
And would you say at your new practice that they've incorporated you into what you want for your birth and what you're looking for, or how you want things to be? Or
Well, they definitely are gearing me towards that. They're very systematic as far as what each visit is going to be like, what you're going to discuss, what you're going to talk about, and they actually give you a schedule of every week, every month that you come to visit, this is what the visits are going to be like. They actually have group visits, which my last appointment last week was a group visit with about 10 other moms, and so that was interesting. We talked about nutrition, so it's kind of gearing you towards that. Plus, they also have a wealth of handouts and resources that they provide to you. So, if you're looking for a doula, if you're looking for a chiropractor, acupuncture, or whatever, parenting class, they give you those resources so you can decide what's going to be beneficial for you, and you take that information. But honestly, a lot of my expectation for this time has been just from me educating myself and just being determined to what I want for this time. So I'm not really going to wait for someone to ask me what I need or what I want to do. I'm going to kind of let them know. So that's really what I've determined to do for myself.
And I've noticed that this time Stephanie shared with me that her practice is doing what's called a team approach. And so she sees one of two midwives at each visit. She doesn't rotate through the whole practice. And one of those two providers will be the providers who will deliver the baby. And how do you feel about that going in this time? What do you think?
I think that that's a great idea. You feel like they get to know you. And so when I go, based on what we've been discussing as far as what I'm expecting and what I want, when I go into labor, they're not going to be surprised if I say I'm not looking to get an epidural, or, I want to walk around, I want to take a shower, I want to get in the water, whatever it is that I'm going to ask for. I want I don't feel that I'll need to fight for that per se, unless it's, you know, just not possible based on what's going on. But I think that that will help, being able to say that I know these people and they know me. They're familiar with what I want.
You determine what you imagine your birth to be like. How did you come up with your birth vision?
Well, I am a prenatal yoga teacher, and I haven't taught in a while, but I was, a few years ago, I taught a group of women that were all, you know, pregnant around the same time, and they in turn invited me to their births. So all of them were having hospital births, and each of them had a different plan. One in particular, I got pretty close to, was named Christina. And Christina planned to have a hospital birth, but a natural hospital birth. And so I showed up at her birth and watched it turn all the way into a cesarean. So I kind of was like, oh, this is very different. So after the birth, I was there, you know, with the baby and noticed the difference in, I noticed that the baby was very drugged up as well too sometimes. I had been to my cousin's birth. I'm all over the place, but I've been to births before that where I had seen a hospital birth, a natural birth, and the baby came out fine, you know, like undrugged, and then with the cesarean, the baby had gone through a lot of trauma. So that made an impression on me also. I thought, oh, you know, that's scary, you know, because you don't realize it's affecting you and the baby at the same time. So during that time, I was seeing like a lot of births. Like, I think I saw at least about 10 births.
Oh, wow.
Like back to
Birth
back.
overload.
I know. I was like, what was happening? And then I wasn't, you know, thinking about having a child then. So now here I am years later, you know, and then it was time for me to have a child, and I still had very vivid memories of, you know, all of their births. And I thought, well, you know, I really want to do this in a different way based on my personality, based on, you know, because I could kind of, you know, put myself in the situation that they were in and know that I wouldn't be able to, you know, handle it as gracefully. I was thinking, if this was me, I think I would have to get up and walk out in this net. But then I know that once you know, you sign off on it,
Right.
you know, you kind of, I don't want it might sound a little strong to say you lose your power, so to say, but I wanted to, you know, just really,
That's what happened.
yeah, well, maybe, yeah. I just really wanted to embrace the whole process of my birth and not have to listen to anybody tell me, you know, no right now, no, even though you're still sort of that way. But, sorry, but not as much as it would have been, I think, if I had given birth in a hospital. So that's what, you know, helped me make my decision to have a natural home birth. Now, the water birth decision came later. I had never seen a water birth, but not in person, but I, you know, researched it and heard that it, you know, softened the process and made birth a lot easier. So that was an add-on. But that's how I came into deciding that I'd have a home.
And how did you journey to find your provider? Because you had a provider and then you switched providers, which sometimes moms can feel like, I can't switch a provider. Sometimes they feel like they have to stay with this provider because they stayed with them, or, you know, and it's not going to be easy to get someone else. But you did a daring thing. You switched a provider. And you went a little bit without a provider while you hunted for a new provider. And so I just want moms to be empowered by that part of your journey, because maybe they're pregnant and they know, this provider, I'm feeling a little wishy-washy about this person delivering my baby.
I did, and you know, one part I skipped in the beginning was I had worked with the provider that I was initially gonna have my baby with. I worked with her with other women, so I felt very, you know, close to her. I felt like, okay, yeah, she would be the one. But then when it came down to it, we really had a lot of differences of opinion, and that's something that, you know, you don't know is going to happen to you. You know, every pregnancy is different, and then it makes you feel, you know, stronger about whatever it is that your wishes were. And it just seemed in this situation, even though I knew her very well, it seemed like everything that I said she was sort of against, or we just had a sort of conflict. So I said, oh, I'm going to have to find another person to do my birth. And it took me a while. So I was working with her through my first trimester. And then by the time I got to my second trimester, I was without a provider, basically, and looking. So I spent the majority of my second trimester looking for someone else that, actually I was looking for Mika, because I had found her online, but she was moved around and I hadn't found her yet. So I was just kind of hanging out there, praying about it and being like, okay, well, the right person will show up, and, and consequently she did. But I don't know, like, when it's interesting in the natural birth community or in the home birth community, there aren't as many options here in Georgia. So, that again probably shows how adamant I was about having the kind of birth.
If I was going to ask you, did you feel nervous about leaving your provider and you hadn't found the new provider yet, or was it easy for you? We don't agree, and so it's just, that's it.
Yeah, that was what it was for me, because I had seen birth enough to know that you need to agree, that you need to have a good working relationship and a strong trust in the person that's going to be there for you. And for some reason we just, we didn't have that in that moment. It's nothing against her as a person, but we just didn't have that. So I needed to find that. And I knew that when I did, that I would know that that's what it was. So I wasn't afraid in that way. And I had experienced and been around enough pregnant women to kind of know that I was okay. Like, I didn't need a person there, telling me every step of the way that, okay, this is fine. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to eat right, keep taking my vitamins and doing the proper things, and that was it.
What are some things that you would say to moms about where you feel that you would give up control in a hospital setting? What are some things that you would say, definitely, if you could name two spots, two things, each of you, where you feel like you definitely lose control over the situation of your body and your birth, what two things would you say are the main things they should be looking for or watch out for?
Well, I would definitely say, when you said you don't want to say lose control, I would say definitely say lose control, because that's how I felt. Mm-hmm. Like, once you got in that hospital, you don't have a say-so based on your provider and how their approach is. And for me, definitely felt like lost control. When it comes to how you're handling the labor pains, I did, experience some of that before I, had any type of medication. And I really could not say that I desperately needed medication, but it was just kind of like, well, you should have it. And, you kind of feel at that point, you don't know what's coming down the line. So then you start second guessing everything, and you're saying, well, maybe I need to, and as far as how long, labor is really, mm-hmm. Like, for me, I was induced one day, and then in the morning, and was in labor all day. And so it got to the point where they said, well, you're not progressing, so we're going to have to do a C-section. So, how long is too long is the question. This was my first pregnancy. I wasn't in labor 24 hours. And it, according to them, it was too long. The baby wasn't in, deep distress. It wasn't an emergency C-section. So, I felt like, well, you're telling me it's too long, and you're not progressing, you have to have a C-section. But when you're tired, you're just kind of ready for this to be over. You don't really have a fight in you at that point. So you kind of have to just go with what they tell you. So,
and that is such a good point. I want to draw on that. So, you lose that fight. You're in that situation and you're tired. When you think about the whole having people who rally around you and say you can keep going, you're okay. How do you think that changes things for a mom? We're all right. We're okay. Do you
Yeah.
think it would have changed your perception and you would have gone with that too?
I definitely think so. I have, of course, a husband who was there, was very supportive, my mother, my sister, but they're not medical providers, they're not labor and delivery nurses. They don't know, what to expect. So of course they're going to tell you you're okay, but then you also have the anxiety there too. So if you have someone that's saying, no, you're fine, you can get through this, I think that would have made a big difference, because that what you're going through is normal, it is okay, and I think that would have probably made a difference for me also.
What are your thoughts on that, Celine?
Well, your question was ways that you can lose control in the hospital. One thing that popped in my head immediately was the position that you give birth in. And as opposed to in home birth, in my home I can walk around, I can do, whatever makes me comfortable, and then when I'm actually giving birth or pushing the baby out, then I can move and do things. And I noticed that in the hospital settings, they don't necessarily allow that. Once you get to a certain point, you're like, get in the bed, stay in the bed, and then you're like, and it, for me, I haven't given birth in another way, but it was just so much more comfortable for me to just kind of do what felt natural for me. And I've had friends, women that I taught, and I taught in my prenatal yoga class, oh, this is a great birthing position, but they weren't able to, get into that position, and they were told, no, stay a certain way. And then they told me afterwards that they wished that they could have gotten up or moved around and just felt that urge, but then they weren't able to. So that's one way, I was like, oh, control. And then interestingly enough for me, and when Mika was there, there was a certain point in my labor that I got very dehydrated. And so I needed a IV, and I needed to get fluids into my body pretty fast. And after the fact, I think about that and I say, okay, that could have been an emergency situation. That could have been something. When Mika was there, she was prepared. And then finally we just went right into the IV, and it was fine. And there was no, like, oh my gosh, I just felt like that could have turned into a whole big thing, but we just